Alright, welcome back everyone. We're finally ready to begin assembling our junk journals. So, let's gather our materials and get started. Things I'll be using today are scissors. I have a paper cutter. If you don't, you can always just measure and draw the lines yourself to cut them. Pencil, ruler, various glues, either a liquid glue like Mod Podge or Elmer glue will work, or you can use a glue stick, and then my folder, needle, thread. So we need to decide what size journal we want to make. There are standard sizes journals come in. You might hear them referred to as A4, B5, B6, A6 passport size, traveler size. You can decide to use a standard size, or you can make up your own size based on the materials you have. If you have an 8.5 by 11 inch sheet of paper and you fold that in half, that's a little smaller than an A5 size. These sizes are often measured in centimeters, so it doesn't quite match up when you're using what we use in the US, but it's fine. Once you've decided your journal size, you'll need to trim your papers to fit that journal. You can either fold and trim or trim then fold, depending on how you want the journal to look. So for my journals, I'll be making a passport size journal, and then for a larger book, I'll be making an 8.25 by 4.25, which is the traveler's notebook size. So what I'm going to do is I'm first going to go through my papers that I have and decide what I want to use. One of the fun things about junk journals is that your pages don't have to be the same size in the journal. If you have pages that are smaller, that's great. It's less work to do. So I begin by trimming my papers down to the correct size for both journals. And then if I have any envelopes, I trim those so that way in the journal, each end is a pocket when you fold it in half. Also, if you have any old books that you want pages out of, you can go ahead and flip through, decide what pages you want to use. For magazines, you're going to want to take 2 pages for every 1 page you would like in your journal. Magazine paper can be a bit flimsy, so I like to double it up. I also like to, in magazines, try to find pages that tend to have more imagery or the text is off to the side, bright colors. We are going to cover it up some, but it's still good to keep how you would like the page to look in mind. I also recently got this catalog from Amazon in the mail. I didn't know Amazon sent out catalogs, but it's really cute and it's got nice pages inside. And there's even like a sticker sheet, which is really nice. So I'm definitely going to be using pages out of here in my journal. I also have packing paper, and you're going to want to use 2 sheets glued together as well. And then some old tissue paper you can use as like a nice accent too if you'd like. Brown paper backs work well for making pockets, so we're going to trim that down too. So we have our papers trimmed down. We can kind of clear off our workstation some, but keep these scraps because you can actually use them in your journal when you start collaging or embellishing the pages. Scraps come in handy for things like that. So first, I like to prep the magazine pages and the packing paper before I assemble the journal. It makes it easier to prep some pages. And then another reuse thing I do is this is actually a cereal bag that I rinsed off and opened up. It works really well for helping to keep glue off my table. What we're going to do is for the packing paper and the magazines, you essentially just glue 2 sheets together, and that makes it a bit sturdy and it'll keep it from tearing when you sew the signatures together or when you're trying to collage onto the page or paint. The paper's less likely to tear by the weight of whatever you're doing. Another fun thing is your sheets you can take over to a sewing machine. You'll need to adjust the settings some. You want to use either a straight stitch or a zigzag stitch, but you'll want to make your stitch length longer and change the settings a bit so that way you don't sew essentially a perforated edge into your paper. Not the neatest, but it is a junk journal, so it doesn't have to look beautifully flawless. So once our pages are layered, we can then go on to prepping them for use in the journal. I like to take gesso. I have white and black gesso, and gesso's used to prep canvases to hold acrylic paint better. So using that on a magazine page gives it a bit of texture and it makes it easier to glue other things down, or if you want to paint on the page. I also like that it mutes the page a bit so that way you can see some of the color, but it's less of a focus, it's more of a background at that point. Black gesso I really like for certain things, but it's less opaque. It definitely just covers the whole sheet up. But if you don't have gesso, you can just take some acrylic paint and put that on to add some color to cover up some of the images and text. These are also jelly printed pages. I have a jelly plate and the back sides of them are just white. So before I use them in my journal, I want to cover them up. So you can just take some of those paper scraps that you have and you can apply that on. So I'll actually use scraps from when I trimmed the pages down, and then I'll just use other assorted scraps I have. And any papers that you're using where only maybe one side has an image, you can just collage the other side and create your own Franken page to use in your journal. So now we take our pages and we start assembling our signatures based on thinking of when you're flipping through the book, how do you want the pages to look when you encounter them? I like to layer my different signatures into stacks, make sure I have enough pages. Once my signatures are prepped, we are then ready to begin folding the pages. I have a bone folder, which is a tool used to get a sharp crease when you fold your papers. So you'll fold the sheet in half and then you use the bone folder to press down that creased edge, and it gives you a very, very flat edge. Whereas if you just take a sheet of paper, fold it in half and finger press it, it's usually not as flat. If you don't have a bone folder, you can use your fingernails to try to get a super pressed edge. You can also use, if you have a ruler, you can use the flat edge of the ruler to press down that edge and get a sharp crease. And then you just repeat this for all the pages. For super thin pages like this dictionary page, I would be worried that it might tear a bit easily at the fold. Same if you have antique papers, those will tear very easily when you fold them because a lot of times you're folding against the grain of the paper. You can use masking tape or washi tape, and so you apply that on your fold and refold it, and it just provides more strength for that center area. When I'm done folding the pages and arranging my signatures, I like to try to get as nice of a crease for that center fold as possible. So I'll try to wedge the pages down as much as I can, and then I will apply clips to the centers. And this just helps flatten that edge even more, which makes your signatures lay better when you have them sewn together or sewn into the journal. Now that our signatures are assembled, we can begin on the cover to our journals. I'm going to show you 2 different ways of creating covers for your journals so you can choose what's best for you based on what you have. For the hardcover journal, we'll be using these food boxes we collected. For the other journal, I'm doing a soft cover, so this envelope that I received in the mail will work great for that. And for the hardcover journal, for these food boxes, we're going to layer it to really make it more sturdy than just having a single one is. So we'll need several boxes for that. A little hack you can do is if you have a box that's like this one, it's a nice size, that would be the perfect width for the spine of a junk journal. If your junk journal fits within the size of one of those food boxes, you don't need to cut all the pieces apart and arrange the spine in the way I'm going to show you. You can just cover that after you trim it down and use that as the spine of your journal. This journal here is actually a biscuit box that I used. I didn't cut the box apart. It just folds nicely, and when I layered the other 2 layers on, I made sure to leave a gap to ensure that it closes all the way. And then also, when you open it, it lays completely flat still, which is nice for a junk journal because that makes it easier to put stuff in it. So we'll begin by cutting up these boxes, and then if you're not using just the full box, what you'll do then is you'll need to cut out 6 covers, so 3 for the front, 3 for the back, and then you'll need to measure and cut out 3 for your spine. And for the spine, you can use whatever size you want. If you know you're going to be adding a lot of stuff to the journal, you may want to leave more space between your signatures. Or you can take your signatures and kind of let them loosely rest and measure and see how comfortably will they fit within what your desired spine is. So I think for my spine, I'll probably make it about 1 inch. It'll be a little tight with 4 signatures, but it'll look nice. So then we'll begin to take those layers that you have, and you'll want to glue them together. I like to glue it so the brown side of the boxes is what's facing outwards, or if you didn't want to have to cover the outside of your journal, you don't have to because it already has a neutral brown color. So apply the glue on, apply your second layer, and then we'll glue again. If you use glue, I'm using glue in a glue brush, but if you use glue like I'll show you here with this glue from a bottle, you're gonna wanna make it flat. If you don't have a brush, just use a scrap to spread it out. This is more important later if you're covering your journal. You want it to be a smooth coating to ensure that the entire piece gets adhered. And then if you have a bone folder, you can use that to press the sheets down more flat together. And since the glues we're using are water-based glues, you can see that with this board, it does curve. So what you're going to want to do is while you let your cover pieces dry, you're going to want to press them. So I have some wax paper here, and I'm just going to lay out my spine and a cover piece, cover that. So that way, if there was any extra glue that gets pressed out by the book, it doesn't glue itself to the book. It'll just peel off the wax paper. So while that's drying, I'm going to begin onto the soft cover. So I'm going to trim this postal envelope down to the size that my passport size journal is going to be. And then I'm only doing 2 layers for this, and I'll just use a glue stick to adhere them together. And then same as before, we'll just set it aside for a bit and let it dry. It doesn't take as long since I used the glue stick and it was less layers. I have this lovely book paper that I'm going to be using. I got this at the Pittsburgh Center for Creative Reuse. If you live in the Pittsburgh area, that is a great store. Think of it as a thrift store for craft supplies. You can go there and you can get just random assortments of stuff people have donated and use that in your journals. So as you can see, this journal is about 5 inches long, and I'm going to put 3 holes in it. I'll do 1 in the center, and then the end holes will be 1 inch from the edge. So to punch your holes after you draw them, I have an awl, and you can punch it from the inside or from the outside to the inside. Or if you have really thick needles, these are my bookbinding needles that I have, and you can see that these are pretty hefty needles compared to sewing needles. In fact, this biggest one right here is pretty much the same size as my awl. So you can just use a needle to punch your holes if necessary. What do you do if you don't have these needles or a way to punch holes or the thread to sew it? Well, there is the option of if you have rubber bands, which I have a lot of. And then you can also use a stapler. This is the only stapler I have. I do not own a regular stapler. I don't know how that happened. So I'll show you with the rubber bands first what you'll do. You'll need 3 rubber bands for this method. I actually created this cruise book a while back, and this was before I had bookbinding supplies. So looking in this book, the signatures are attached just with some string. This is embroidery thread, and you can see it just wraps around the spine of the book and it goes through each signature, and that's how they're held in. I can actually just remove these. So for our little tiny notebook here, we're going to take the rubber band and we're just going to put that down the center, and then grab your cover and you're going to slide your cover through, and then you're going to take another rubber band and your second signature and you'll put this through the center, and then you will put that underneath that journal that's in the middle, and you'll want to grab the rubber band on the other side, take your last signature, and you'll open it to the center page, and then you slip that through. And so your whole journal is being held together by rubber bands. No staples, no sewing. You'll just center it on your cover and fold it around. And that's just with 2 rubber bands that holds it together. And you can see my cover's a little off-centered, but that's fine. It's a junk journal. You could probably make the cover a bit bigger to have less of a struggle. And so technically this book is done. You don't have to decorate your cover if you don't want to. You can just put stickers on it. But we're going to decorate our cover, and I'm going to show you another way to bind. I can't actually show you because I have this stapler that's meant for crafting, and it's actually too short to go all the way in to the center of the signature to staple it. I'll show you here. This is on another one. I didn't make this, I bought this. But I'm going to sew these signatures. We're going to make little pamphlet stitches. I'll use a Sharpie so you can see the holes more, but generally you would mark it with something that wouldn't really show. So I'm going to mark my 3 holes that I'm going to punch, my center hole, and then 1 inch from each edge. And you want to make sure that the center fold is very lined up, and you just punch the needle through. Please don't stab yourself. Repeat that for all 3. We get our wax thread. Whatever thread you use, you want to make sure it doesn't do like this thread. I can pull it and just tear it. You don't want that to happen while you're sewing. So like embroidery thread works really well for something like this because it's not going to break when you pull it. And if you're worried about tangles, you can, if you have thread wax, you can use, this is thread gloss I have. It's a bit fancier than just plain wax, but the important thing is that it's wax. And you take the thread and you would just drag it through your wax like that, and that'll give it a little coating if you don't have pre-waxed thread. I'm just going to use wax thread since I have that on hand already. To measure out how much you'll need, you have your fold, so you'll want to do for a pamphlet stitch, you really only just need 2 lengths. And then we'll get our needle. Bookbinding needles tend to have larger holes, so it makes it really easy to thread. And then you take your first signature, and you'll want to start from the inside middle. Put that through your hole. Hold it down so you don't pull it all the way through. Go through the top, out through the bottom, back in through that middle. We'll tie it off. You can just do a simple double knot. If you're concerned about it coming unknotted, you can put a little dot of glue on the knot and let that dry. And then that is the first little book that's done. So we'll do that for all 3. And you actually see here, I somehow messed up my measuring. I don't know what happened. It's not important here, but that would be a hassle in other books, depending on how you were sewing them together. So always check your measurements. So now we will move on to finishing the cover. I'm going to use this paper. So really what you'll need to do is you just need enough paper so that there's about 1 inch or so around each edge, because you'll fold that over. So you do need a little bit of excess. And I'm just going to use a glue stick for this since it's smaller and I don't have to worry about it drying super quick. Just put that in the center and make sure that it's nice and flat, and you adhere it down. And then I'm going ahead and creasing my edges and trimming it down a bit because you don't need that much excess, just enough to fold it over. And for the corners, I'll show you a couple ways to do the corners. You can either just cut out this little squares, you fold it over. You can also do an angled cut, which is a bit better. So you have that nice angle. So you'll glue down the sides first, and then you can do the top and bottom. And you can see on the angled cut how it overlaps just a little bit, and it looks very nice. And on the side where I just did this square cut, you can see where it's not close enough, so it sticks out a bit. For the angled corners, you just have to worry about making sure it actually covers each other. So once you have the outside paper on, now what you'll need is the inside sheet, which I'm going to use as scrap. And you'll glue it down. You can see my very wonderful edge there that I'm actually going to try to straighten up a bit. So now I want to do this one like a traveler's notebook cover. And here's my little instructions for how to do it. We'll need to punch 5 holes in the center of the cover, and we'll need some elastic or rubber bands. So we gotta find the center of our little notebook, and then down that middle we're gonna mark. And then from the center hole, we need the 4 other holes, 2 near the top and 2 near the bottom, and we'll just punch those. And we just have to make sure that they're large enough we can fit our rubber band through. So you can use rubber bands for this again. I cut this rubber band and I'm going to just tie it into a little knot because this is going to go through that center hole and be used as the closure. So I want to make sure it doesn't pull through. And then I'll want to take the loop, put that through, and just get the knot so it's flush. All right, and that's done. But you can see here, this is an old rubber band. It's probably gonna break, but the nice thing is I can just use another rubber band when that one does finally give out. I actually have some elastic, so I'm just going to use that because it's a bit smaller. So you feed it from the inside out and then through that second from the top hole to the inside, down to the second from the bottom hole, and then back to the inside from the furthest bottom. That center small piece you'll want to just be flush. It's that larger outside piece, you want to leave it a little bit slack so that way you can fit the tiny notebook through it. And then same as before, we now take this rubber band and we'll put it through here, slide it under, slide the other signature through the other half of that rubber band. And this is how traveler notebooks are held together. So when you finish a notebook, you can reuse the cover. You can just put in another tiny notebook to use. And you can see here, my cover's a little too small because I made it the same size, but it's fine. It looks great. So now moving back to our hardcover, we have our 3 pieces here. They are dry, they are mostly flat. I'm gonna use this nice paper again, and you'll want to leave a little gap between like 1/4 of an inch or less than 1/4 of an inch, just so when you fold it, it closes. So we're gonna get our piece of paper and decide where we want. Like I have a spot up here that's kind of messed up, so I want to make sure that's not going to be on my cover, but the part that I want will be. So I lay my pieces down and then I draw the line for the first part of the cover. And you can use any glue to attach these. Use water-based glue. You can have this problem where you see on this journal, there's a little bit of wrinkliness. I used one of those glues that was in a tube and I didn't brush it out so it was flat so you can actually see the streaks. And then if you use fabric, the glue will bleed through your fabric. You can see here, that's glue that came through the fabric. So I'm gonna Mod Podge this part of the cover, line it up, place it down, get it flat as possible. You can use a bone folder to try to push out any bubbles you may have. And then you'll put the spine down, and remember you wanna leave a little bit of a gap between the cover and the spine, so that way when it folds it closes all the way. And then we'll attach the other cover, leaving that gap. Make sure it's nice and flat, and then we can trim it down if you have excess. Then once again, pre-creasing those folds, trimming our corners. We're going to apply some glue on these edges. You want to get nice and covered, press it, and do all 4 sides that way. So now we're ready to apply that inside lining sheet. I'm going to use some of my tea-dyed paper because I think that'll complement the cover nicely. You'll trim it down so maybe each side's about 1/4 inch or so from the size of your cover. And then apply your glue. And then I'm going to use the glue stick to show you why sometimes a glue stick may be better. But you can see it's bubbled on the side where the Mod Podge was used because I wasn't as careful. And you'll want to press it down and kind of press it into where that fold is to help pre-fold it. It'll be less strain. And now we are ready to put our signatures into this. So first you're going to want to make a template. You can see I have a 1-inch template here that's the size of my spine. And on here, we're going to do that same pamphlet stitch that we did for the traveler's notebook. But this is the spine template, so you're going to mark it 4 times. So my center line, and then from each end, and then evenly space out where you're going to have the signatures attached to give them a little room from each other. And you'll line that up on your spine and punch it with your hole punch. If you're worried about it shifting, you can actually tape it down and punch the holes. And you really just need to mark it because then you can remove the template and punch the holes all the way through. And now you'll need to punch the holes for your signatures, and you'll need to use each specific section from the template on that signature, otherwise it might not match up to the holes punched. So I use the template to mark the first signature's holes on the spine and then punch those. And when it comes to attaching them, I have lots of different wax threads here, but I think I'm going to use the more yellow one because it matches the gold better and it'll stand out more. Get my bookbinding needle. Once again, start from that inside center hole, put it through the cover, leave that little tail on the inside, and then go up to the top or bottom. Put it through all your sheets, pull it taut, push it back to the outside, and then come back in through that middle. And then you can just tie it off, trim it, like that. And then repeat for the next signature. And if you're worried about it pulling through, you can just tape it down. And it's good to check. You can actually see see how it's like that? You don't want that. So you'll want to pull that through so you don't have that loopy loop. And then you just do the same thing for the rest of the signatures in the book and attach each of them to your cover. Put our needles away and look at that. All done. And you can see that it closes nicely and then how much it opens. So you could put a band around it if you want it. And then it lays flat so you can decorate your pages, journal, paint, and you don't have to fight the book to open it all the way because no matter where you're at, it'll lay flat. And big pocket. For this one, I did the same way. I put that fabric strip on the outside though to cover it up. So you could do that too if you'd like. And here are our finished journals. If you guys create your own journal based off these tutorials, definitely tag the libraries in it, because I would love to see the stuff you make. I hope that this tutorial has been helpful for you in creating your own journals. I know a big question a lot of people have is, how do I use these journals? Like, what should I do in it? And that's gonna be our final video. And I'll just hopefully give you some ideas and inspiration as to how you can use your books. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.